Union is often misunderstood. Many think it is about bodies meeting, about the skin touching the skin, about the pulse of desire that runs through the blood when two people collide. But the true essence of union does not begin in the flesh. It begins in awareness. When a man enters a woman, it is not only the body that enters, it is his energy, his intention, his truth, his hidden self. What he feels in that moment is not only pleasure, it is reflection. He sees himself mirrored in her stillness, in her breath, in the quiet acceptance that asks for presence rather than performance. The body can be deceiving. It makes us believe we are close when in truth, we may still be distant. Two bodies can be joined and yet two souls may remain strangers. True union requires a different kind of closeness, one that cannot be touched, only felt. It is the closeness of energy aligning, of hearts synchronizing in silence. In this space, the mind becomes still. There is no more chasing, no proving, no trying to be enough. There is only surrender. The man who understands this does not seek to conquer, he seeks to connect. When he goes beyond the surface, he feels the invisible pull. The energy field that surrounds her receives him and transforms what he gives. It is a sacred exchange, unseen by the eyes, but deeply known by the soul. His energy enters her not to possess, but to merge, not to take, but to become part of something greater than himself. He realizes that this act, so often reduced to physicality, is actually a reflection of life itself, the eternal dance between giving and receiving, between presence and surrender, between masculine and feminine energy. He feels, often without words, that her body is not a place of pleasure alone, but a temple of transformation. Within her space, he is reminded of what it means to be human, vulnerable, exposed, searching. The ego dissolves when met with genuine softness. Every breath she takes draws him deeper into stillness. Every heartbeat reminds him that connection is not something he can control, it is something he must allow. In that moment, a man begins to understand that union beyond the flesh is not about motion but emotion, not about friction but energy. The deeper he goes into her, the deeper he goes into himself. He meets the parts of his being that he often hides from the world. His fears, his doubts, his longing to be seen beyond the mask of strength. When he looks into her eyes, he sees not just desire but reflection, a mirror of his own yearning to be whole. In this depth, time disappears. The world outside loses its meaning. There is no past or future, only the rhythm of two beings breathing as one. It is here that he feels the purity of connection, not the kind that demands or expects, but the kind that simply exists. The silence between breaths becomes louder than any word. The stillness between movements becomes more intimate than touch. Union beyond the flesh requires awareness. It asks for presence, a mind that listens, a heart that feels, a soul that does not rush. When a man truly enters this space, he understands that intimacy is not found in the act itself, but in the consciousness that surrounds it. His body becomes the vessel, but his awareness becomes the bridge. Through her, he learns to listen without words, to feel without reason, to love without conditions. He realizes that energy never lies. The body can pretend, the lips can deceive, but energy always reveals truth. If his mind is restless, she will feel it. If his heart is absent, the space will remain hollow. True union cannot be faked because it is not built from desire. It is born from alignment. When his intention is pure, when his presence is undivided, he experiences something that no physical pleasure can equal. Stillness in movement, peace in passion, oneness in duality. This is where he discovers that union is not about entering another person, but entering the sacred space between them, the invisible thread that connects two energies into one vibration. He feels her not as separate but as extension, not as other but as mirror. He understands that every sensation is not just a physical impulse but a transmission of energy. What he gives returns amplified or transformed depending on the intention behind it. The purity of his presence determines the depth of her openness. The depth of her openness determines the clarity of his realization. Union beyond the flesh is not something that happens once. It is a continual process of awareness. Every touch becomes communication, every gaze becomes meditation, every breath becomes prayer. The more conscious he becomes, the more sacred the connection grows. He learns that pleasure without presence is emptiness, and presence without ego is peace. He begins to value stillness over stimulation, depth over desire, alignment over excitement. Through her, he awakens to himself. Through her softness, he learns strength. Through her silence, he hears truth. The moment of union becomes a lesson, not in possession, but in perception. He realizes that the body was never the destination. It was only the doorway. The true entry is into the energy that exists beyond form, beyond name, beyond expectation. Here, he no longer seeks to prove his worth, but to dissolve into the oneness that connects them both. In that sacred stillness, where two energies merge and the self disappears, the man finally understands that love was never about seeking or taking. It was always about remembering. Remembering the wholeness that already exists within, reflected in another's presence. And in that remembering, he finds peace not through the body, but through awareness, the silent knowing that real union lives beyond the flesh. There is a quiet kind of power that lives in vulnerability. But most people never touch it because they are afraid to be seen without their armor. From childhood, a man is taught to be strong, to hide emotion, to fight against his own softness as if it were a weakness. He learns to hold his breath instead of release, to bite his tongue instead of speak, to clench his fists instead of feel. But the truth is, the deepest form of strength does not come from control. It comes from surrender. Vulnerability is not the absence of power. It is the doorway to it. When a man allows himself to be vulnerable, he steps into the unknown. He lets go of the illusion that he must always be unshakable. In intimacy, this truth reveals itself in the most sacred way. When he goes beyond the surface of touch and opens the gates of his inner world, he realizes that the moment of connection is not about performance or dominance. It is about presence and authenticity. A man who cannot be vulnerable cannot truly connect, because true connection requires exposure. It asks him to be seen without the layers of pride, without the mask of certainty. To be vulnerable is to stand in front of another soul without hiding. It is to say, "This is who I am." The light and the darkness, the confidence and the fear. When he does this, he begins to feel something he cannot feel through power alone: freedom. The burden of pretending falls away. The tension of perfection dissolves. He starts to realize that strength is not built by pretending to have no wounds, but by allowing those wounds to teach him compassion. The act of vulnerability is not weakness, it is truth emotion. When a man dares to show his heart, when he stops trying to impress and instead chooses to express, something shifts in his energy. He becomes lighter. The woman before him no longer feels a wall but a bridge. His openness invites her safety, his honesty invites her trust. What he feels in return is not judgment, but connection, the kind that moves beneath words and touches the soul. She does not admire his perfection, she feels his truth. Vulnerability requires courage. It demands that he stands in a space where he could be misunderstood, rejected, or hurt, yet still chooses to remain open. This is why it is the highest form of strength. Any man can wear a mask. Any man can hide behind power, success, or confidence. But it takes a deeper kind of strength to stay open in the face of uncertainty. To say what is real when silence would be safer. To feel emotion when numbness would be easier. To choose love when fear would offer protection. When he embraces vulnerability, he begins to understand his emotional landscape more clearly. He realizes that anger often hides sadness and pride often hides pain. The masculine energy is not diminished by emotion. It is refined by it. Vulnerability softens the edges without taking away the power. It gives him depth. It gives him dimension. It allows him to hold space, not only for others but for himself. In this state, his energy becomes calm, grounded, steady. He no longer seeks control over everything because he understands that real power flows through surrender, not resistance. In the presence of intimacy, vulnerability transforms the entire experience. When a man allows himself to be emotionally naked, his touch changes. It becomes gentler, slower, more intentional. His presence expands because it is no longer guarded. The energy between two souls deepens. She feels his truth not through words but through energy, a calm openness that says, "I am here, fully." This is what creates true intimacy, not the physical act but the emotional transparency that breathes within it. A man who embraces vulnerability is not driven by the need to be right, but by the desire to be real. He no longer defines himself through dominance, but through depth. His sensitivity becomes his strength because it connects him to the pulse of life, to empathy, to understanding, to presence. The more he allows himself to feel, the more he becomes aware of what others feel. His compassion expands, his intuition sharpens, his awareness grows. This is how vulnerability becomes wisdom. It turns pain into understanding and fear into clarity. There is a quiet stillness that comes when a man accepts his own sensitivity. The noise of ego fades away. The inner battle softens. He no longer fights against himself. He realizes that emotions are not enemies to be defeated, but messages to be heard. Vulnerability teaches him how to listen. To his body, to his heart, to the subtle movements of life around him. Through this listening, he discovers peace that cannot be found through control. Vulnerability is the meeting point between the inner and the outer world. It is where authenticity lives. It is the moment when he stops performing and simply exists as he is. This is where love begins, not in the image, but in the truth behind it. When he shares his fears, his doubts, his tenderness, he opens the door to connection that is impossible to reach through perfection. The other person does not need him to be flawless. They need him to be real. In vulnerability, he finds an unexpected strength, the kind that does not depend on circumstances. It is not the power that comes from being unbreakable, but the power that comes from knowing that even if he breaks, he can rebuild. This strength is quiet, but unshakable. It is not loud or demanding, it is rooted and steady. When he allows himself to feel fully, he becomes unafraid of emotion, unafraid of loss, unafraid of truth. He stops running from himself. The man who learns vulnerability discovers that love is not something he gives only when it is safe, but something he embodies even when it is uncertain. He learns to show up with his heart unguarded, to speak when his voice trembles, to stay when the mind wants to flee. He becomes more human, more grounded, more real. His strength is no longer measured by how much he can hold back, but by how deeply he can let go. Through vulnerability, he returns to authenticity. And in that authenticity, he discovers the quiet, powerful truth that the heart was never meant to be hidden. Connection is not about ownership. It is about movement, a continuous flow of energy between two beings who choose to meet in awareness. Yet many enter connection with the mindset of possession, mistaking closeness for control. They believe that love means claiming, that desire means holding, that intimacy means ownership. But energy was never meant to be caged. When a man truly understands the nature of energy, he realizes that every union, every touch, every shared breath is an exchange, not a conquest. What he gives returns to him transformed. What he takes without awareness drains him. The balance between giving and receiving becomes the foundation of true connection. When a man meets a woman, he meets not only her body but her entire field of energy. Her presence carries frequencies, softness, intuition, emotion, creation. His presence carries direction, focus, movement, clarity. When they connect, these energies dance. The masculine energy enters to give, to stabilize, to create structure. The feminine energy receives, amplifies, and transforms. In this sacred exchange, both evolve. This is why a conscious union does not deplete but expands both. Energy flows in harmony when there is respect, when there is awareness, when there is no attempt to own or dominate. Possession is born from fear. The fear of losing what brings comfort. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being replaced. But fear blocks flow. It turns connection into tension, love into demand. The moment he tries to possess her energy, he interrupts the sacred rhythm of exchange. Energy can only circulate when both are free. To love consciously is to give energy willingly, not to take it forcefully. It is to understand that what you give is what you receive, magnified through the reflection of another. When he approaches intimacy with awareness, he starts to feel this exchange in every moment. He realizes that her body is not a place to enter, but a space to respect. Her energy is not something to own, but something to honor. Every touch becomes a dialogue between energies. His presence gives direction, her openness gives depth. He begins to feel that true pleasure is not in taking but in harmonizing, when both energies move as one current, without pressure, without force. In that moment, he is not separate from her, he is part of a larger field that breathes through them both. Energy exchange teaches him balance. It reminds him that to receive, he must also give. To give, he must also be empty. He cannot pour from a closed heart, nor can he receive with a clenched hand. The deeper he understands this, the more peaceful his presence becomes. His touch carries awareness instead of need. His eyes hold presence instead of demand. His words begin to flow with intention instead of expectation. The energy he carries determines the quality of connection he experiences. The more conscious he becomes of this exchange, the more he begins to sense how energy moves. He notices how his thoughts affect her mood, how his presence influences her breath, how her emotions reflect his inner state. Energy does not lie. It mirrors. When he gives with ego, she resists. When he gives with openness, she receives. This is the unspoken language of the soul. It cannot be manipulated, only aligned. In this space, he learns that intimacy is not about what he can get, but about what he can share. In every moment of connection, energy is in motion. Her softness draws him in, his groundedness keeps her safe. She surrenders not to his power, but to his presence. He enters not to take from her, but to merge with her. The deeper the awareness, the more sacred the exchange becomes. It is not about dominance or submission, but about mutual evolution. The energy he gives flows into her and returns as healing, inspiration, and emotional clarity. She takes what is given, transforms it, and sends it back elevated. This is the natural law of polarity, the continuous cycle of giving and receiving. When a man forgets this law and seeks to possess, he loses alignment. The moment he believes he owns her, the flow stops. What was once alive becomes heavy. What was once light becomes burden. Possession disconnects both from their natural rhythm. Energy begins to stagnate, and love turns into attachment. Attachment drains because it tries to control what is meant to move. True connection, however, breathes, it expands, it allows both to grow, to change, to evolve. To exist in energy exchange means to move without grasping. It is to trust that what is meant to flow toward you will not require control. It means giving from a full heart, not from fear. In this way, every interaction becomes sacred. The more conscious his giving becomes, the more vibrant his energy feels. When he shares his strength, his attention, his tenderness, he feels his own energy expanding instead of diminishing. The more he gives from truth, the more abundance returns. This is the paradox of energy. What you give without demand multiplies. What you try to possess eventually dissolves. He begins to understand that every moment of connection is an act of co-creation. When he touches her with presence, he imprints energy. When she receives with openness, she amplifies it. Together, they create a frequency that neither could produce alone. This is the essence of sacred union, the merging of energies that gives birth to transformation. Every time energy is exchanged consciously, both are renewed. Both are changed. In this awareness, the act of intimacy becomes meditation. The breath becomes the bridge between giving and receiving. The mind becomes silent. The heart becomes the center. He feels the energy rising, flowing through both bodies like a river that cleanses and connects. He realizes that love is not a possession but a current. It moves through those who are open, and it disappears from those who cling. To keep energy alive, he must keep it free. Energy exchange is not limited to intimacy. It exists in every word, every glance, every moment of attention. When he speaks from truth, he gives energy that nourishes. When he listens with presence, he receives energy that enlightens. When he loves without condition, he becomes a vessel for something greater than desire. Every relationship, every connection becomes an opportunity to practice this awareness. To understand energy is to understand that nothing truly belongs to anyone. People do not belong to people. Experiences do not belong to moments. Everything is movement. Everything is flow. What stays is what aligns. What leaves is what no longer vibrates at the same frequency. When he accepts this, he no longer fears loss because he knows energy never truly disappears. It only transforms. The more he honors this truth, the more peaceful his presence becomes, and the more deeply he can love without chains, without expectation, without the need to possess. To be emotionally naked is to stand in truth without the shield of pretension. It is the purest form of exposure, where no words are rehearsed, no expressions are calculated, and no emotions are filtered. It is when the heart steps forward unguarded, stripped of everything the mind has built to protect it. Most people fear this level of openness because it leaves no room to hide. To be emotionally naked means to let someone see the rawness of who you are. The confusion, the pain, the longing, the joy, the silent parts of yourself that even you sometimes avoid. But in this vulnerability lies the essence of connection. When a man becomes emotionally naked, he enters a space of truth that few dare to touch. Society has trained him to build walls, to conceal emotion under logic, to mask fear behind pride. But when he finally allows those layers to fall, something within him begins to breathe again. The act of emotional exposure becomes an act of liberation. It is not weakness that is revealed, but authenticity. And authenticity is the deepest strength a human can embody. Emotional nakedness is not about confessing everything or drowning others in your pain. It is about honesty without the fear of judgment. It is when the voice no longer trembles with resistance, but flows freely from the heart. When he speaks from this space, he does not seek validation, he seeks connection. The person before him is no longer an audience but a mirror, reflecting back the truth he finally has the courage to face. In relationships, emotional nakedness is the foundation upon which real intimacy is built. Without it, every connection remains incomplete. Two people may share moments, but not souls. They may touch, but not feel. They may speak, but not understand. Only when the masks fall does the heart recognize another. When a man opens himself in this way, his energy changes. His presence deepens. His words carry a different vibration, one that resonates, one that is felt rather than merely heard. Emotional nakedness requires stillness. The mind, which always seeks control, resists it. The ego whispers that exposure is danger, that feelings are weakness, yet it is only through exposure that healing begins. The truth, when hidden, grows heavy. When spoken, it releases. A man who allows himself to be seen in his emotional truth no longer hides behind strength. He becomes strength itself, not because he can endure without breaking, but because he can break and still remain open. When he expresses his emotions fully without defense, he starts to discover parts of himself that were buried beneath silence. Every unspoken feeling becomes a weight on the spirit. Emotional nakedness releases that weight. It turns pain into clarity, confusion into understanding. It allows love to flow freely, without the barriers of pride or fear. In this openness, connection transforms from something fragile into something real. In moments of emotional exposure, there is no performance, no need to prove anything. The heart takes over where the mind once ruled. The energy between two people becomes transparent, a mirror reflecting truth. If one heart opens, the other feels invited to open too. This is how emotional nakedness becomes contagious. Honesty awakens honesty. When one person has the courage to reveal, it gives permission for others to do the same. When a man allows himself to be seen emotionally, he also becomes a witness to his own depth. He realizes that emotion does not weaken him, it strengthens him by grounding him in his humanity. He begins to understand that being open does not mean losing control. It means trusting the flow of energy that passes through him. The tears that fall are not signs of fragility, but symbols of release, proof that something is being freed from the weight of repression. Emotional nakedness demands presence. It asks him to listen, not just to others, but to the quiet movements within himself. To recognize when anger hides sadness, when silence hides fear, when strength hides longing. Every emotion becomes a doorway, every feeling a messenger. Through openness, he learns to read the language of his inner world. Instead of running from it, he starts to walk through it. This is where emotional maturity is born, not in suppression, but in awareness. When he shares his emotions consciously, without projection or blame, the space around him softens. Those who once felt guarded begin to trust. The atmosphere becomes safe for truth. He learns that being emotionally naked is not about losing power, but about embodying it differently. Power, in this form, is gentle. It listens. It feels. It allows. In this state, he becomes more magnetic, not because he tries to impress, but because his presence is real. To be emotionally naked means to accept that not every feeling will be understood, and not every truth will be received. But the act of revealing it is an act of alignment, a return to authenticity. It means living without the constant tension of hiding. It means being able to breathe freely, even when the world is watching. It is an intimate rebellion against the conditioning that says strength must be silent. In love, emotional nakedness is the bridge between two souls. Without it, love remains shallow, confined to gestures and words. But when two people meet in emotional truth, when both dare to expose their fears, their hopes, their imperfections, a sacred trust is formed. This trust is not built on promises but on presence. It says, I see you not for what you show but for what you are. This kind of seeing heals. It dissolves the loneliness that comes from pretending. When a man can sit in his emotion without needing to escape it, he becomes a space of safety for others. His strength is no longer about endurance, it is about openness. He learns that emotion is energy moving through him. Not something to suppress, but something to understand. Emotional nakedness allows this energy to flow without blockage, allowing life itself to move freely through him. He begins to feel everything more vividly: love, sadness, gratitude, peace, and with that, his connection to life deepens. the more emotionally naked he becomes, the more aligned he feels with truth. He no longer carries the burden of pretending to be untouchable. The layers of performance fall away. What remains is presence, simple, raw, real, and in that presence, every emotion becomes sacred, every tear becomes cleansing, every silence becomes communication. Emotional nakedness is not about exposure for attention, it is about honesty for liberation. It is the quiet courage to exist without armor, to love without walls, and to be without disguise. There are moments in life that do not fade, even when time tries to bury them. They live quietly within us, not as thoughts, but as sensations, as echoes that hum beneath the surface of our daily movements. The memory of connection is one of those silent, enduring imprints. It is not held in the mind, it is stored in the body, in the energy field, in the spaces that words can never reach. When two souls truly meet, their energies intertwine in a way that memory alone cannot explain. What remains is not an image, not a story, but a vibration. A frequency that continues to move within long after the moment has ended. When a man connects deeply with another, it is not only the body that remembers, it is his energy, his emotions, his spirit. The memory of connection is not physical attachment, it is energetic resonance. It lingers because something was exchanged beyond touch, something sacred that bypassed logic and entered the soul. He may walk away, time may pass, distance may grow, yet the sensation of that exchange lingers like a quiet pulse beneath his awareness. It appears in flashes. A smell, a song, a sound, a silence, all capable of pulling him back to that feeling where everything aligned effortlessly. The human body is a vessel of energy. Every embrace, every glance, every shared breath leaves a trace. When the energy between two people harmonizes, it creates a field, invisible but powerful, magnetic but subtle. This field becomes memory, not in the brain but in the soul's archive. He might not be able to explain why he suddenly feels a wave of calm or ache when he thinks of her, but it is because that energetic imprint still vibrates within him. True connection imprints not through intensity but through presence. The more conscious the exchange, the deeper the mark it leaves. In the quiet after intimacy, when everything slows down, he feels it. The afterglow that is not purely physical but deeply spiritual. It is the energy still moving, still adjusting, still reminding him that what just happened was more than an act, it was a merging. The body forgets many things, but the energy remembers everything. The memory of connection becomes a part of him, woven into his emotional and spiritual fabric. It is not something he can force away, nor should he. It becomes a teacher, reminding him that every encounter has meaning, that energy once shared never truly disappears. It transforms, it evolves, it integrates. Sometimes, this memory feels like longing, not necessarily for the person, but for the feeling of being fully met. The memory is not about possession, it is about remembrance. It recalls the safety, the peace, the sense of being completely seen. When he was with her, perhaps for the first time, he dropped his defenses without realizing it. In her presence, he was no longer performing, he was simply being. The memory of that stillness stays. It whispers to him in moments of solitude, reminding him of the kind of presence that makes the soul feel at home. Connection has layers. The shallow ones fade quickly, but the deeper ones root themselves in places that thought cannot access. The memory that remains is not about moments or words, but about how he felt within himself when he was with her. The softness that opened in him, the silence that felt alive, the vulnerability that felt safe. These are the memories that linger, because they are not about the other person, they are about the self that was revealed in that shared space. Through her presence, he experienced a version of himself that was raw, tender, real. That version leaves a mark. Energy does not follow time. While the body moves forward, the energetic residue of connection moves in its own rhythm. Sometimes he feels it resurface when he least expects it. A quiet ache in the heart, a sudden wave of warmth, a brief stillness that feels like recognition. These are not coincidences, they are reminders. The memory of connection speaks through sensation, not through words. It tells him that he once touched something pure, something that existed beyond attachment or desire. A frequency of truth that cannot be replicated through effort. Every connection changes him. The memory of it reshapes how he loves, how he listens, how he gives. The more aware he becomes, the more he understands that the purpose of connection was never to hold, but to awaken. The memory remains not to haunt, but to guide, showing him what presence feels like, teaching him what alignment means. When he meets someone new, the body remembers what true energy feels like. It recognizes resonance before the mind does. This is why the memory of connection is so powerful. It becomes intuition, a compass pointing toward authenticity. Sometimes the memory feels bittersweet. It carries both gratitude and ache. Gratitude for having experienced such depth, and ache because it cannot be repeated in the same form. But this is the beauty of energy. It never truly ends, it only changes form. The love that once moved between two people continues to flow through life, through creation, through silence. He may not share the same space with her again, but the energy that once connected them continues to influence his path, helping him understand love not as possession, but as expansion. The memory of connection is sacred because it reveals that nothing real is ever lost. When he remembers her, he is not recalling an image but a frequency. He is remembering what it felt like to be open, to be present, to be alive in a way that was unfiltered. That memory calls him back to himself. It asks him to live with that same openness, even when she is no longer there. It becomes a spiritual echo, urging him to stay true to the depth he once touched. There is a silence that follows true connection, a silence that is not empty but full of echoes, full of understanding. In that silence, he can still feel her energy moving somewhere in the unseen, not as possession but as remembrance. It is the soul's way of acknowledging that once, in the vast expanse of existence, two energies met and recognized each other. The recognition does not fade, it lives as vibration, as subtle awareness, as the quiet knowing that something sacred once unfolded. And so, the memory of connection becomes a soft hum within him, not loud, not painful, but constant. It moves with him, teaching him presence, humility, and reverence. Every time he feels it, he is reminded that connection is not measured by time spent, but by truth shared. That even fleeting moments can leave eternal imprints when two souls meet in authenticity. And though the world moves forward, that vibration of connection continues to live, carrying within it the timeless echo of everything that was once real. And conscious intimacy is not about the act of being close, it is about the awareness within that closeness. It is not something that happens accidentally or through desire alone. It is born from presence, the deep attention that allows one to see beyond the surface of another person. In this awareness, the other becomes a mirror, reflecting everything that lives within us, the light and the shadow, the longing and the resistance, the truth and the illusion. The mirror of conscious intimacy shows us not only who we love, but also who we are beneath the layers of who we pretend to be. When a man enters this kind of intimacy, he is not just meeting another body or personality, he is meeting his own reflection through the presence of another. Every reaction, every feeling, every attraction and discomfort becomes a message. The way he looks at her, the way he listens or fails to listen, the way he opens or withdraws, all of it reveals the patterns within him. Conscious intimacy is the art of awareness through connection. It is not a performance, not a role, but a practice of seeing and being seen in truth. The mirror does not flatter, it reveals. In conscious intimacy, what is hidden comes to light. The parts of him that he has avoided, his fears, insecurities, unhealed wounds, are reflected in the way he loves and reacts. When he sees her sadness, it may awaken his helplessness. When he feels her distance, it may awaken his fear of abandonment. When she loves him deeply, it may awaken his fear of not being worthy. Every emotion becomes a reflection of his own inner landscape. Through her presence, he meets himself more deeply than he ever could in solitude. In unconscious intimacy, most people try to fix or blame the other for what they feel. But conscious intimacy demands responsibility. It asks him to pause and look within before reacting. It invites him to ask, what is this moment showing me about myself? In that question lies growth. The mirror is not there to judge, but to teach. Every disagreement, every misunderstanding, every moment of tension becomes an opportunity for awareness. If he can stay present through the discomfort, the mirror will reveal what needs healing. The more aware he becomes, the more sacred the connection feels. He begins to see that the woman before him is not here to complete him, but to reveal him. Her energy reflects what his soul is ready to understand. When she is soft, he learns to surrender. When she is distant, he learns patience. When she challenges him, he learns humility. Each moment becomes a lesson in consciousness. The more he listens to these lessons, the deeper his presence becomes and the more authentic his love grows. Conscious intimacy requires courage. It asks him to stand naked in truth, without the armor of ego. The mirror of love is clear, and it reflects everything, even the parts he wishes to hide. To be fully seen is both beautiful and terrifying. But in this transparency lies transformation. He begins to understand that love is not a place to escape from himself, but a space to meet himself more honestly. The connection becomes a form of meditation. Each touch, each gaze, each silence becomes an invitation to awareness. In the mirror of conscious intimacy, energy speaks louder than words. The body becomes the instrument through which truth communicates. If his presence is distracted, she feels it instantly. If his heart is closed, her energy withdraws. The relationship becomes a reflection of his inner alignment. The more present he is, the more harmony flows between them. He realizes that conscious intimacy is not maintained through effort, but through awareness, through the simple act of being here, completely. Every moment shared becomes sacred when seen through this lens. When he listens without defending, he sees her truth clearly. When he speaks without pride, she feels his sincerity. When he touches with awareness, she feels his essence rather than his need. This is the essence of conscious intimacy. It transforms every ordinary act into an expression of presence. The connection stops being a search for fulfillment and becomes a practice of awareness. The mirror also reflects beauty, not the beauty of appearance, but the beauty of being. Through her openness, he sees what compassion feels like. Through her honesty, he learns the power of vulnerability. Through her silence, he understands the depth of peace. Each moment of genuine connection shows him the capacity of his own heart. What he loves in her is often what is awakening within himself. The qualities he admires, her strength, her sensitivity, her grace, are reflections of the energies waiting to be lived inside him. Conscious intimacy dissolves illusion. It reveals that love is not about control, not about ownership, not about the satisfaction of the self. It is about expansion. When two people come together in awareness, they become mirrors for each other's evolution. They stop asking, "How can you make me happy?" and begin asking, "What truth are we here to awaken in each other?" This shift transforms love from dependence into freedom. Sometimes the mirror will show shadows, old patterns of fear, anger, or doubt. It is easy to blame the reflection, to project the pain onto the other. But conscious intimacy asks for maturity, to hold the mirror steady even when what it reveals is uncomfortable. The pain that arises in connection is not punishment, it is revelation. It shows where healing is needed. If he can remain present in that moment, without running or shutting down, the energy of awareness transforms the pain into understanding. In the silence after a deep moment of connection, he can feel it. That stillness where nothing needs to be said. It is the space where two energies merge without effort, where awareness meets awareness. In that silence, there is no separation, no ownership, no fear. There is only the reflection of consciousness itself, pure, unfiltered, infinite. It is here that he realizes that conscious intimacy is not something to achieve, but something to allow. It is what happens naturally when awareness replaces desire, when truth replaces pretense, when presence replaces expectation. The mirror of conscious intimacy keeps teaching long after the moment has passed. Every memory becomes a reflection. Every silence becomes a lesson. He learns that connection is not about finding someone to fill the emptiness, but about meeting someone who reflects his fullness back to him. Each encounter becomes a practice of awareness, a reminder that the true purpose of intimacy is not pleasure, not attachment, but awakening. Through the mirror, he sees not just another person, but the unfolding of his own consciousness, reflected perfectly in the eyes of another.